Hey, Hugo, do you know one thing? This man is not a bracero.
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Today on the Classic Movie Reviews podcast, we are taking on Border Incident 1949. This is a great cross-border film noir with a very strong cast. The film is rated a very low 7.1 on imdb.com. It doesn't fare any better on RottenTomatoes.com with 67% on the tomato meter and 58% audience approval. Roger Westcomb of Flinders University Department of Screen and Media said, quote, compared the film to classic westerns, yet far from a typical western sense of freedom, Border Incident shares with director Mann's previous film noir, T-Men, the film's inky, submersive visual qualities. There are wide but not open spaces, as Alton beautifully registers gray tone, but grim visuals make the distant horizon as closed as the American border. The constant presence of vulnerable, innocent peasants adds a piquancy to Border Incident, raising the stakes from the destiny of a mere two police agents to that of an entire underclass, unquote. Director Anthony Mann was basically making a remake of T-Men 1947 using a different government agency. John Alton was the director of photography. I guess we'll have to credit Eddie Muller for finding this gem and programming it on TCM's Noir Alley. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Ricardo Montalbán played Mexican immigration agent Pablo Rodriguez. This great star was introduced in the film noir Mystery Street, 1950. Sig Ruman was cast as Hugo Wolfgang Ulrich, the leader of the Mexican gang. Ruman was first covered in House of Frankenstein, 1944, but he is probably best known for playing Schultz in Stalag 17, 1953. Charles McGraw was tough as nails as American Coyote Jeff Amboy. McGraw was first mentioned in the film noir Brute Force 1947, but he was extensively covered in The Narrow Margin 1952 as he growled his way along on a train trip. Arthur Honeycutt was another American coyote named Clayton Nordell. Honeycutt was first covered in Cat Ballou 1965. Alfonso Bedoya was a Mexican coyote named Chuchillo. Bedoya was recently covered in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre 1948. John Ridgely played Mr. Neely, a supervisory American immigration officer. Ridgely was first covered in the film noir The Big Sleep 1946. Otto Waldis played the role of Fritz, a member of the Mexican gang. Waldis was born in 1901 in the Austria-Hungarian Empire. He began his acting career in Vienna and made his film debut in M 1931. In 1940, he moved to America ahead of the Nazi scourge. He was a character actor and photographer. His best-known films include the previously mentioned M 1931, The Fighting O'Flynn 1949, The Whip Hand 1951, Drive-In Favorite, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman 1958, and Judgment at Nuremberg 1961. Waldis died in 1974. Howard Da Silva played American farmer and migrant smuggler Owen Parkson. Da Silva was born in Ohio in 1909. He started working as a steel worker, but began state work in New York at the age of 20. Yeah, he must have left steel working after Rudy's friend fell into that vat. He worked on Broadway from 1930 to 1982 as an actor, writer, and director. He was a popular character actor, and his films include Sergeant York 1941, The Big Shot 1942, The Lost Weekend 1945, The Blue Dahlia 1946, and They Live by Night 1948. Da Silva played Ben Franklin 3 times. The first was in the Broadway production of 1776. This was followed by a National Park Service film used in the interpretation of Franklin's home in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. Finally, he was great and hilarious in the musical movie 1776, released in 1972. In 1947, actor Robert Taylor was called before the Un-American House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC. He named Da Silva as a possible communist. He was also later named by writer Martin Berkeley. This led to an FBI investigation, and Da Silva was called before HUAC on March 21, 1951. He was the first Hollywood-affiliated person to legally use his Fifth Amendment rights granted under the U.S. Constitution. He was not one of the so-called Hollywood 10. Da Silva was blacklisted but returned to film after more than a decade. He died in 1986, 2 years after his last film, Garbo Talks, 1984. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
With narration, the agriculture of California is shown. It talks about the need for labor coming from Mexico. On the border, Mexican workers called braceros are waiting to get a work permit. However, there is another group that crosses the border illegally. They are plagued by bandits on both sides of the border. A group is heading back to Mexico after they have worked and have money in their pockets. The border is a barbed wire fence. Lookouts in Mexico direct a group of mounted Anglos and Mexicans towards the workers. In a narrow valley, the travelers are caught, robbed, and murdered. In the group of murderers are Zappolito, Arnold Moss, and Clayton Nordell, Arthur Honeycutt. The bodies are placed in quicksand as the robbers flee. Mexican and U.S. governments respond to the growing number of murders by sending agents. Pablo Rodriguez, Ricardo Montalbán, and Jack Burns, George Murphy, are part of a task force formed to stop the problem. The agents and their supervisors meet in Mexico across from the California border. Rodriguez and Barnes know each other from a case they worked in Brownsville, the hottest and driest place on the planet.
You've worked with one another before.
Of course.
Oh, Pablo here, sure, we're old friends. We worked on a case together in Brownsville, Texas, years ago. Incidentally, whatever happened to that very pretty girl? She was about 20 years old, the one we picked up in Matamoros.
Oh, yes. Well, the last I heard of her, she was getting much less beautiful in a prison in Tamaulipas.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Do you wish to continue with these personal reminiscences?
Well, this was an awful pretty girl, senor.
She certainly was.
The plan is for Rodriguez to pretend to be a bracero, and Burns will follow, recording the connections. Burns will also have fake, numbered permits to smoke out the American side. Rodriguez moves into the crowd of braceros waiting on work permits. He tells the others that he doesn't want to wait. Juan Garcia, James Mitchell, advises him not to take the illegal route, but shows him to a man that can arrange the crossing for 70 pesos. He is given a flower to wear in his hat and told to be at the La Fortunate Barberia at 10 p.m. Rodriguez makes contact with Burns and passes the information. Juan sees the beautiful shirt Burns is wearing. A survivor of one of the crossings makes it back and confesses the story to a priest. Juan meets with his wife and decides to come along on the crossing. That night in front of the La Fortunate Barberera, they are gathered up by a man, Miguel Contreras, and led to a doorway in the back. Truchillo Alfonso Bedoya opens the door. Burns is watching as the men enter. An old woman checks hands to determine if they are really laborers. She tips off Cochillo that Rodriguez is not a bracero. The old woman sees Burns and sends Fritz, Otto Waldis, to check him out. Burns gets the jump on Fritz and KOs him with one punch. At another stop, Rodriguez is grabbed and taken to a room away from the group. Zappolito collects the money from the other men. Truchillo tells Zappolito about Rodriguez. Zappolito tells Clayton to load the truck with the workers. Hugo Wolfgang Ulrich, Sig Ruman, comes into the room where Rodriguez is being held.
Hey, Hugo. Do you know one thing? This man is not a bracero.
I know. Why? Why do you want to go if you're not a bracero?
Does one have to be a bracero to want to be a bracero?
Who wants to be a bracero except a bracero?
Maybe someone who doesn't want to be discovered for something else.
I guess Hugo hid in Mexico after World War II. Rodriguez spins a pretty good tale. Burns has the local police raid the bar to help Rodriguez get away. The truck carrying the workers moves north along a rough road. An old man gets sick and they insist that the truck stop. The man dies before anything can be done. The two coyotes dump the body in the desert. The men in the truck pray for the dead man. They are taken to a narrow valley where the lookout now watches for border patrols on the American side. They lower the fence and drive into the U.S. Waiting on the American side is Jeff Amboy, Charles McGraw. Jeff has the men get out of the truck and he loads them into a trailer. Jeff pays the coyotes $30 for each worker. Jeff tows the trailer to a large farm. Farm owner and head U.S. coyote Owen Parkson, Howard Da Silva, wants the workers to be taken off his property because the supplier of fake work permits didn't come through. Jeff is talking smack until Parkson shows up. Jeff convinces Parkson that they would not be able to get past the interior border check at Indio. Parkson orders Jeff to check on why the permits didn't come through. In the morning, all of the workers are taken to the field to work while guards stand over them with rifles. Burns checks in with his contact, Mr. Neely, John Ridgely. He tells that he has lost Rodriguez. Neely also knows about the man that sells the fake permits and has him under surveillance. They post fake wanted posters for Burns under an assumed name saying he stole work permits. They also give him a contact in Kansas City for requesting more permits.
There's a fellow named Baldy we've been watching. He handles illegal immigration permits. We know his source, but not who he passes them on to. We got his hands tied, all right, though. We've got a stake out in his store. You know, someplace, somebody, maybe a lot of somebodies, are going to need illegal crossing cards. And who do you think's going to have them?
Who do I think's going to have me wants to know? Couldn't be me.
Oh, yes. It was your idea.
Well, I'd better have a pretty good excuse for having these things.
You have.
Driver's license. My name is Jack Bryant, and several hundred different kinds of G-men are looking for me for stealing 425 immigration permits in New Orleans. Where are the rest of them?
Waiting for you, safe in Kansas City, Missouri.
How do I get them?
Just wire Roy, box 1510. Tell him to send your manuscripts.
Parkson and Jeff are waiting in their office. He calls Hugo and tells him not to send any more braceros until further notice. Burns shows up in Hugo's bar and has a drink. When he leaves a blank work permit on the counter. Hugo sends Pacalolo, Jose Torve, to follow Burns. Burns wakes up in his room and a big knife is against his nose. Pacalolo, Chuchilo, and Zapalito rob him and take his gun. They plan to rob him of any permits he has. Chocolilo steals his shirt, and he doesn't need a badge. He is taken back and Fritz tortures him. Finally, Burns tells him to look in his left shoe. In there is a wanted poster. Hugo comes in and wants to know where the other permits are. Burns tells him that they are in the U.S., but he can get them if he is paid. Chuchilo and Zapalito go to see Parkson about the permits. Chuchilo is wearing the Barnes stolen shirt. The two men look for stuff to pilfer as they wait in the house. Parkson comes in, and they tell that they have come from Hugo about permits. They show Parkson the wanted poster. They want $20 for each permit. He sends the two men away to the bunkhouse to eat. Juan sees the shirt that Chuchilo is wearing. When Chuchilo and Zapalito get back, Clayton and Jeff come in with Burns. Parkson makes the two give Burns his shirt and jacket back. Burns clinks their heads together stooge style. Parkson begins negotiating with Burns. Clayton and Jeff apparently have stolen Burns from Hugo. Burns says he wants $10 each for the permits. Parkson then says the permits must be sent to the postmaster. Burns also tells that Jeff tried to double-cross Parkson. Parkson then calls a contact in Kansas City. Later, Rodriguez is explaining to the men how they are being robbed. A guard bursts in and breaks up the meeting. Juan has been beaten for feeding the man locked in the water tower. The man is Burns. Juan has seen the shirt again on Burns and tells Rodriguez. Rodriguez sneaks out and heads to the water tower. Clayton is standing guard below the room in the water tower. Clayton hears Rodriguez climbing. He checks on Burns. Rodriguez contacts Burns. Burns tells Rodriguez to get word to Neely about his location, but not to try and break him out.
Tomorrow night I will try to get you out. No, you mustn't do that yet. I have to stay here for a while. Why? Well, the plan is beginning to work. Now, here's what you do. You go to the immigration office at Calexico and get hold of Neely. Yes. He's the chief inspector. And make sure he knows where I am in case there's a slip-up. Right. When you see him, you tell him, look out.
What you doing, Brian? Talking to yourself?
Yeah, sure, I do it all the time. What's the matter with you, partner? You nervous? Can't you sleep?
I ain't supposed to sleep.
Why don't you bring a chair up here? We'll talk a bit.
I ain't supposed to talk neither.
Rodriguez escapes down a tree and gets away from Clayton. In a streak of bad luck, Rodriguez is caught by Jeff trying to get into town. Parkson has Burns in his office, but they send a man on a motorcycle to pick up the permits. Neely is waiting in the back of the post office. When he sees it's not Burns, they decide to tail the motorcycle. In some fine riding and some excellent camera work, the car chases the motorcycle along dirt roads until the motorcycle crosses a railroad bridge and drives in the furrow of a field. The motorcycle rider makes it back to Parkson's house. Parkson calls Hugo and asks for 100 workers to be sent across. That night, they are sending the workers with their new permits to other locations in the southeast. Parkson begins to pay Burns off when he gets a call from Kansas City. Doc, Edwin Max, followed the man that received Burns's wire and found that he went directly to the immigration office after he got the wire.
Pour yourself a snort while I pay you off.
All right. Will you join me?
Yeah, sure. $4,230. You can buy a lot of peace and quiet for that.
Yeah, a lot of other things, too.
Hello. Kansas City. Doc Pryor, put him on. Hello, Doc. I expect to hear from you long before this.
I know, Parky, but I got picked up on a gun beef. Just got out of the clink today. The rep fell through. But here's what happened. The guy that picked up the wire at 1510 went right to the immigration office here in town. Is that worth anything to you?
It is.
Parkson and Burns get into a fight, but Jeff stops him with a gun at the door. Jeff and Clayton take Burns out to kill him. Rodriguez cuts his way out of the truck he is in and drives it back to the farm after beating the driver. The original driver hangs onto the window for a while before falling. Rodriguez and Juan make it to a ditch on the edge of the field where the others are planning on killing Burns. Burns makes a break and is shot by Jeff. He then clunks Burns in the head so he is knocked out. Jeff gets in a Caterpillar that has disking blades on the back. He begins driving towards the knocked out Burns as Juan and Rodriguez watch. Burns wakes as the cat gets closer. But he is a star, so he will be fine. Juan and Rodriguez can't get past Clayton. Burns tries to crawl away. I'm sure he'll be fine. Help must be coming. The tractor crawls over him, and he is cut to pieces. This is the most horrific black and white death scene I've ever seen. Clayton sees the other two men and begins firing at them. They make it back to the truck and escape. They stop at a farmhouse, and Rodriguez forces his way inside to phone Neely. He tells what is happening and where the laborers are moving. He tells that Jeff and Clayton are wanted for murder. Just then, the lady, Mrs. Jeff Amboy, comes in with a gun and orders Rodriguez to hang up.
Bryant has been murdered on the Parkson ranch. Parkson is using Bryant's permits to truck braceros to Fresno, Arizona, and Blythe. Tonight. Yes. Get Jeff Amboy and Clay Nordell for the murder of Bryant.
Where are you? I'll send a car.
Oh, just a minute. Where am I? What place?
Hang up that phone.
Neely heads for the Amboy house. She calls Parkson and her husband Jeff and lets him know who she has captured. Parkson, Jeff, and Clayton go to the Amboy house. They load Rodriguez in the truck with the workers and are going to take them all to the canyon to be killed. Mrs. Amboy gets in the car with Parkson. Rodriguez tells the men in the truck what is going on, and they should all get weapons ready if they have any. Clayton orders the Mexicans back into Mexico. Parkson wants to travel with Jeff's wife, but Jeff sends her to Nogales.
We'll take the cars across.
Who's we?
Bella and I. She can drive the truck.
Oh, yeah? Bella! Take this crate and ramble, honey. Wait for me in Nogales. Get going.
Hey! Hey! What do you think you're doing?
Called us up good, didn't you? You're always so smart, so careful. The mastermind nobody can touch. Brother, when you flop good.
Are you crazy?
No, I'm not crazy. Just getting smart, that's all. You're going with us, Parkson. For once, I want you to see what your dirty work looks like.
I don't know anything about these things.
You can learn.
He forces Parkson to go with him for the killing. Clayton takes one cliffside, and Jeff takes the other. They leave Parkson with a rifle driving the Mexicans forward. U.S. immigration folks arrive at the fence, and I guess they invade Mexico. Neely tells an officer to have the Mexican immigrations come in from the other side into the Canyon de la Muerte. The Canyon of Death? Jeez, avoid this place. Rodriguez jumps behind a rock and ambushes Parkson when he comes along. Rodriguez gets the gun and forces Parkson to walk with the Mexicans. They force him into the lead. When he comes to the killing spot, Truchillo, Zappolito, and the other killers are waiting. Parkson calls out to them, but Jeff shoots him. He falls into the quicksand and is struggling. Clayton and Jeff begin firing at the laborers. Rodriguez returns fire. Fritz and the other killers attack, and the workers begin fighting back with their improvised weapons. Rodriguez shoots Jeff pretty low in the belly, crotch low, and he falls to his death. Truchillo attacks Juan. Rodriguez is shooting it out with Zappolito, but runs out of bullets. They begin wrestling, and they both go into the quicksand. Zappolito goes under first. Juan kills Truchillo. Juan then pulls Rodriguez out of the quicksand with the help of others. He is completely clean in the next scene. Burns is given a posthumous medal from Mexico, and Rodriguez is given an American award. Juan and his wife are there, and we are told that the workers bring the food forth. I'll be right back with conclusions and the world-famous short summary following a word from our sponsors. Summary. This movie was made under the working name Wetbacks. This film was able to show criminals on both sides of the border. They were getting pressure to show American businesses as pure from the growing anti-communist folks. They clearly and with balance showed the struggle that continues until this day. You probably heard me talk about Brownsville, Texas a time or two. The first time I drove down there, I was shocked to learn that they had border control stations hundreds of miles inland. They mentioned the same thing in this movie about going to Indio and having an interior border station. In Texas, I dubbed the area between the U.S.-Mexican border and the second checkpoints as the autonomous tribal regions, much as you see on maps of Pakistan. Is the government saying it's okay to go this far but no further? Perhaps you've seen the meme that says, as a child, I thought quicksand would be a bigger problem. Have you ever heard of someone dying in quicksand? I spent 30 years working in the woods and never saw the stuff, although once in the Everglades I thought I would find it. If you're an okay boomer, quicksand as a plot device was at its zenith in the 1960s. An article in Slate magazine said that at its peak in the 1960s, almost 3% of movies had people sinking into some form of quicksand. Owlcation.com says, quote, quicksand can kill people. However, it typically doesn't kill people by drowning them. Humans are actually less dense than quicksand. Humans may sink up to their waist, but will go no further, unquote. You may die from exhaustion or exposure, but not drowning. One thing about this movie, they were dropping so many bodies into quicksand that by the time Ricardo Montalbán went in, he would have been able to stand on a pile of bones. World famous short summary. Please excuse my Spanish here. I'm taking classes, but it'll take a while. Cualquier cosa puede pasar en la frontera. Anything can happen on the border. Common phrase from the southern U.S. border. Hope you enjoyed today's show. You can find connections to social media and email on the site at classicmovierev.com or in the podcast show notes. If you like the show, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, you can tell a friend, colleague, or family member about the show, or leave a review at Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show get found. If you want to comment, suggest a movie, or help out, contact me by email at jec@classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.